to have a nice little time with us as we have a wonderful conversation. I am your host. My name is Damian Pardo, and this is the Forward Miami Show. And just so you know, Forward Miami is an organization, a local nonprofit that pretty much tries to bring in all the different parts of Miami. I often describe it, when people say Miami is a salad, it is, but Forward Miami tries to be the salad bowl. So we try to bring everybody in and understand each other better, and that way function better as a community. So welcome to our show today. I am thrilled today because we have Brother Lyle Muhammad with us, with Circle of Brotherhood, Executive Director of Circle of Brotherhood, correct?
Yes, sir, my good brother.
Okay. And I've had the wonderful pleasure of interacting with him and his organization. And I've just impressed isn't the right word. I feel like what you do in our community, we need to be doing on steroids. Like we need to be doing this type of work everywhere. So I'm thrilled to have you with us. And I thought we could start out the show if you could talk to us a little bit about you, yourself, your background, how you got to this.
Okay, excellent. Well, first of all, it's always an honor and a privilege, Damian, where anyone feels it a value to share. And I want to thank you for making this platform available. Obviously not just to me, but I guess that there have been some carrots and some radishes and some other green peppers and different things in the salad bowl. So exactly, some garlic too. And so for that, I just want you to know on behalf of myself and the Circle of Brotherhood, we're extremely grateful. Just a little background about myself. I tell people all the time, I was born in a little teeny city called Springfield, Massachusetts. For those who don't know, that's where the Basketball Hall of Fame is. But I'm born to a mother who had me at 16. I had a brother by the time she was 17. I had a sister by the time she was 18. 6 years later, another sister. At that time, father wasn't involved, and the various struggles that come along with that. Growing up poor and in the social service systems and those kind of abuses, and then violence in the home, drug use around and those kind of things. By the time I was 14, I was kicked out of a whole state school system. I couldn't go to any more schools in the state of Massachusetts. And so we have family in Baltimore. So my mother moved us to Baltimore. But all of this was a beautiful divine journey. And I share those particular things about my background because they play such a key role in what has given me the foundation for who I am today and what I do today. And on top of that, I guess I'm an amalgamation of my life experiences, a God-given purpose, and a striving for excellence in self-improvement. And what led me to being, I've been in South Florida since 2007. God led and God fed. And in terms of the development of the Circle of Brotherhood, back in about 2012, there was a sitting commissioner, Michelle Spence Jones, in the city of Miami. And show most people are familiar with, First 48, the crime, the murder detective show. And there was a gentleman on the show from the city of Miami Police Department at that time named Detective Ford. And there was a rash of murders that were taking place. And what really struck him about him this time, but by the way, think about it. He's been a homicide detective for 27 years.
Yeah.
But imagine being a homicide detective in Overtown, Liberty City, Little Haiti for 27 years. And so, but what struck him this time, Damian, was that they were becoming cold cases. So long story short, if it's not too late, he gets in touch with Michelle Spence Jones, and she says, I don't know what to do, but I know who to call. And at that time, she called about 4 or 5 of us together. Some of us were meeting each other for the first time. Some of us knew of each other's work, but we made a promise to ourselves that day that we would never again allow anything come between us that may be leaning toward differences for all the right we could do together for what we have in common. And that led to the birth of the Circle of Brotherhood.
And do you want to talk a little bit about today, like the organization and its programs and what it does in our community?
We've been tremendously blessed, primarily a volunteer organization since 2012. Fortunately for us, we were able to secure a contract with the Miami-Dade County Violence Initiative Program. And that actually allowed us to staff ourselves for the first time. And so we've been building our infrastructure, but in terms of services, all the talk that people have about the absence of positive Black men in the community, you can find all of that and more right within the circle of brotherhood. We have a beautiful location and base right in the heart of Brownsville, in Liberty City, and there, 58,000 square foot facility with other organizations as well. We're able to do everything from, of course, mentoring, and with our young men, economic development, employment training programs. We also involved in crime prevention and economic sustainability and development. And so our motto is Black men solving our own community problems. Yeah. And you will never find us involved in anything that is wrong without us figuring out how our hands should be involved with it as a solution.
Yeah, I have to say, like, what you're doing is a model for everyone, because you're taking a community and holding in that section of the community yourselves accountable for everything that's happening in the community. So, kudos, number one, on that. And number two, I got the pleasure to participate in your implicit bias training with the police departments. And I thought maybe you could talk a little bit about that.
Excellent. Another one of the models of the Circle of Brotherhood is he who is best, let him lead. And we have men from all walk of life. We have men from the streets. We have men that have done double-digit years in prison, and we have men that have never seen the back of a police car.
Can you repeat that for people? Because I think that's something that doesn't sink in that easily.
And it's key, because it's one of the keys to our success. We have men from all walk of life. We have men from the streets, who are part of the problem in terms of crime and spending double-digit years in prison, and men who are from the suite, so to speak, businessmen, but all together, you have men who are Christian, men who are Muslim, again, from all walk of life to solve our own community problems.
Brother Lyle, how do you do that? I mean, how do you take that level of diversity and work with them?
It's funny that you say that, because during this particular COVID-19 pandemic, and also with the rise of civil unrest in America and across the world, many people have been attempting to build coalitions and come in solidarity and work together. They got great intention, but they don't understand the human people issue element.
I understand.
And I will say again that we were blessed at our foundation. It didn't come easy. I'm a Muslim. Yeah. Our president and one of our other co-founders, Jeffrey Mack, he's a Christian. He caught a lot of slack. Why are you working with that Muslim brother and so forth? But when you're able to, first of all, withstand all of that, and then understand that you have to have human development at the core development of any group of people you're bringing together. And when you come from all different walk of life, that's true. But I'll be completely honest, the common element is love. The common element is love. And we love each other too much. And we love our community too much to let anything get in the way of in terms of building division.
Yeah, I was in that training, and I have to say, I felt that. I felt that. I got that. That was communicated, not by words, but by the feeling in the room and by actions, that it very much was about love. And when you're talking about diversity like that within the group, how about diversity when it has to do with color? I mean, today I wore black and white to highlight color and race and the real impact of those issues that have come to the forefront with the murder of George Floyd and so many other people. And, how do you take it to that level and work with these people that are coming to you with all the good intentions that you just mentioned?
Yeah, I'll answer that, and then I'll segue back into the police training. Again, all of us are a sum total of our life experiences. And I've been blessed personally, as many other individuals, to have grown up and been around different cultures and different populations of people at different times and different stages of my life and development. And so there was always an innate understanding there. But when you hit that common care button, nothing else really matters. When you are a human being that is bent on human service, nobody's going to say, you got on a plaid shirt, I want somebody that has on a blue shirt to help me today. You want somebody who cares. And so in this field of work, like minds and like hearts are attracted. And so when you talk about bringing people together now, there's another difficult side of that. And this is how I'll segue back into the police training. We've done a terrible job for the most part in our institutions at even approaching particular racial differences. We take an approach that says be colorblind. But wait a minute, If we're telling people to be colorblind, that means I don't exist. That means I don't. The differences that even make us valuable, that they don't exist. No, there's a scripture that says that we were separated into tribes so that we can get to know each other better. Even inside the brotherhood, the bond of the brothers getting to know each other. And so we understand that from a training and development perspective. We have individuals in our organization that were former police officers and individuals that are national human development trainers. And when you put that together with a bunch of brothers who've been from the streets too, what a perfect police working with such a love and a fervor and putting it into our children, seeing our women shine at the example of men. And see, one of our greatest arguments, Damon, is we've always been there, but people have always wanted us, after you dropped a bomb on our community and after you destroyed our families, you want us to volunteer to put the pieces back together. That's a full-time job. So the circle of brotherhood has been able to create energy and synergy where developing our community is full-time work, and it's contagious.
Oh, I bet.
It's contagious.
I bet. Is there for people listening that might want to help, what is the best way with, those folks with good intentions that want to help and expand the kind of work that you're doing?
I would say two things. The first thing I would say is get your mind right. All of us are sick. Now, granted, some of us may be sicker than others, but we're all sick and we have to start dealing with our own self. As a matter of fact, we have a training, a beautiful personal development training that's taking place next week with one of our newly developed partners, a Google affiliate called Search Inside Yourself Leadership. So we all have to do more searching inside of ourself. That's where the majority of the work is. And the second thing I would say is visit our website. I love our website because if you thoroughly search on our website, you will know exactly what the Circle of Brotherhood is all about. And that's www.circleofbrotherhoodmiami.org. And then you can figure out from there. And I remember I learned something very valuable when I was working with Alonzo Mourning at the Overtown Youth Center. And that's when people come in and they want to help, they help best where their passion and their interests lie.
Sure.
So we have open arms. Even with the police training, we've had police officers come back and we do annual events. They were so impacted by our work that they do annual community events with us because they understand the value of that.
Yeah, I was kind of a little taken aback too in the training, seeing how some Black officers had the same issues that I was a little surprised just in general with how we all share a lot of issues.
Right. I would tell you this, that we are in a culture of many, many, many subcultures. And whether you are white, whether you are Black, whether you call yourself Latino, whether you call yourself from the Caribbean, or whether you call yourself from Europe or the continent of Africa or South America, if you are involved in a police subculture, your mindset has been molded, shaped, and formed into a very, very unique perspective of how to deal with people. And so in understanding that, I don't care what your cultural background is, there's a whole nother level of exploration that needs to be done on that level. And some people run from the surgery and some people run to it, but that's it's surgery. But there's a lot of bold leadership in policing. And one thing that I learned, and I tell people, I work with people, I'm one of the ones that used to wear the shirt, F the police, that's me, but I tell people that if you are sincere in working and you want our community to be better, we have allies everywhere. There are people who wear that uniform who want to see the same thing. Our minds might be in different places. But once we create the space and then you put in that space human development, you got to deal with your mind. You can't watch some of the videos that we show you in some of those trainings and not have no wrangling going on in your head. You got to deal with yourself. And even if that's all you do for the day, if you noticed, even in the training, some of the officers were quite debative, if you will.
Yes.
Because they just haven't gotten to the point where they learned how to listen at a level where it's okay, even if you disagree, not to be offended. And so we got a lot of training to do in a lot of our institutions, and police departments are one of them, but we got a lot of bold leadership that sees it and knows it and is moving it in the right direction.
Yeah, I remember there was a small movie that you showed with the experiments where people put the Black doll and the white doll in front of young Black girls.
Right.
And inevitably they would all choose the white girl as being pretty, or the one that, and there was that one person that couldn't believe that that was, who happened to be Black, who could not believe that his daughter would possibly choose a white
Right.
all. And I thought it was
Mhm.
interesting,
Mhm.
to repeat that the experiment had been done many, many times.
Right.
Maybe you want to comment a little bit on that.
Yeah, I'll say first of all, just so people can have a backdrop on it, it was initially done by I think it was Kenneth Clark, a lawyer in the Brown versus Board of Education, separate and unequal in terms of education in schools, and he did the doll test. What people fail to realize that we got a two-sided coin. If white supremacy is on one side of the coin, black inferiority is on the other. So you can't talk about white supremacy without talking about black inferiority. And where most people, we're just so far behind in understanding the damage that white supremacy has done to the mentality of a people whose entire culture, language, way of life, mores, and folkways not have just been destroyed, but completely disconnected. And what's been put in its place. And so I remember growing up as a young man, severe self-esteem issues, because on the other side of white supremacy is black inferiority. Even something as simple of I grew up in a Episcopalian church, and I remember walking in the church as a little boy and seeing all of the prophets and all of the messengers, and none of them looked like me. And that used to make me feel some kind of way that none of those images looked like me. That suppressed me. When they kicked me out of the school system, they didn't realize that they were dealing with an individual who was suffering from black inferiority, which is supported by everything from the tail lie vision to the music, to the so-called educational system. We got a lot of work to do. But what we need to do most, Damian, when we create those kind of spaces, no matter where someone is, it's okay. You can come into that space and be totally opposed, but if you come honestly into the space, it's okay. It's not about agreeing. It's about growing, learning, sharing, developing. And sometimes when you're talking about race relations, that is the hardest area for people to grow and develop and share in.
Oh, I agree with that. I mean, all you have to do is look online to see the kind of exchanges, which I think some of them end up damaging more than helping.
Right.
Do you have any advice for people that are maybe trying to create a space like that?
Yeah, people who understand the value of the salad bowls need to keep making salad.
Yeah.
And in all reality, if you even notice how polarized politics is, even as controversial and comical or entertainment filled as this political election has been, you didn't deal with a swing of people changing their mindset. I don't care how many commercials were shared, how many speeches were held, how many debates were held. People pretty much are in their kick. And as long as we stay stuck, we'll never learn and grow. But wherever there's examples of individuals that know how to make salad, you never had it before.
Right.
What it does is it creates a whole new culture. We have to keep doing this work. We have in safe, uncomfortable spaces.
Wow, that's a great way to put it. Kind of create the vibe and the energy that supports.
Right. Because how can I grow if I'm not willing to be uncomfortable? And if I get offended, someone's way of life, if it offends me, the insecurity is mine. All in my mind set for where someone is, as they should, to come to a table.
Absolutely. Wow.
When we first started the Circle of Brotherhood, it built and grew itself. Go through communities, we would just start certain, who do we serve? Our community. And of course, where they can identify with abandonment and neglect. Respect the space of each opening occurs. And so what that allows for someone to do with the word respect, use word in the universe. We use respect like fear. You better respect me. Do you know who I am? You better fear me. But when you look at the word respect, meaning to do again and do over, take another look. And you learn and you grow, and it raises your awareness of the humaneness of the other person, the other society, the other culture. If you stay stuck in your own, which many people will. And that brings me to my last point. Everyone does not want to see humanity grow. Some people like things just the way they are, Damien.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, some people, if they could make things a little bit worse, would spend their lifetime doing so. And so everybody's not getting into the salad bowl, but it's okay. Once we become the example and it's rooted in our children, that's when we build a whole new reality.
And it doesn't escape me how similar. I mean, when you look at if you were looking at the frame of a car, the frame of the car of what a lot of us experience in our own subcultures or subgroups, it's very similar. It's kind of like the same chassis.
Right.
Some are way more severe. Some are way who felt a lot of things and that came out very early. I can look at race and other issues, whether it's ethnicity or any other issue, kind of, and see the chassis. Are you all working on maybe building that chassis out into other things, or
Beautifully
it's too
said.
much?
It can't be too much, because our goal is to touch all of humanity. Two things I think are important on that point. I remember, I think the name of the movie was Bully. Came out, had a screening down on South Beach, and I always take my children and youth that I'm working with. Always expose your young people to growth and learning opportunities. Always. And so I got a whole group of young people going to the theater, and we're standing in line. And there's these two gentlemen standing behind us. And the young people, they're dialoguing with me back and forth. And one of the young men, a tear starts coming down his eye. And one of my beautiful little children that I was working with turns around and looks at him and says, "Why are you crying?" He says, "Well, I'm crying for two reasons." He says, "I'm crying because as I get ready to go in here and see this movie, I remember, as he's telling the story, being bullied because he identified himself as homosexual in high school. But he was more crying tears of joy because he saw all the children that would get ready to go and have this learning experience, And so when individuals like you and I could work together, then other people begin to see that once we look past what we may think are major differences or major disagreements, we all settle on what's common and we build from there. You don't build on a point of disagreement. You build from a point of agreement. That's in conflict resolution. So what do we look like? And I'll share this last thing. I'm living out my God-given purpose. And so I've always been a magnet for people or peoples who were in need of support. And being built that way, you can't help but be who and what you are. And that is a helper of humanity. And so as we look at building bridges and gaps, I have an opportunity to sit in a lot of rooms with a lot of children. And I'll share this. This is an intimate piece I think is important. And I'm allowed in those spaces because they feel certain things from me. And I remember being in spaces with young people, maybe for a 2 or 3 day workshop, where many of them may identify as homosexual or anywhere on a particular spectrum that they identify with, all different. And I asked a young lady there who I do some workshops and training with, because the training was on race relations. So I'm kind of tying this together. And I said, tell me from your experience, what makes these settings where we deal with race relations so comfortable from people who have other type of abuses that they suffer and deal with? Said, because it's one of the only safe places that they can even come. And I know no matter how we identify that, those are broken children. They're broken if for no other reason they have grown up in a world that has looked at them and treated them as if they are alien from our society. Can you imagine if you and I grew up on Mars?
Yeah.
We don't know nothing about how Mars started at the beginning, how things are supposed to be. and we grow up on Mars, don't nobody, and they're treating us in such a way that it causes us to commit suicide. It causes us to hurt and cut ourselves. It causes us to bleach our skin. So these are all commonalities, but the most beautiful thing is that there is a way, and it all starts with proper communication. And my last point on it is I remember doing a mentoring session, and it's this young girl who looked like she wasn't paying attention. She had her book up, just head down on the desk, and I gave her space. Teachers need to learn how to give students their space. So anyway, as I finally kind of come over to her, she had a quote on her book. And the quote said, "People don't build walls to keep people out. They build walls to see what people are willing to do to get inside." And that's where the work is, Damian. That's where the work is.
Can you repeat that?
Yes. People don't build walls to keep people out. They build walls to see what people are really doing to get inside. Right. See, they've been hurt.
Because if they love me, they're going to climb that wall.
Right. And because, I've been hurt so much, I got to have me a wall. I'm just going to let you just slap me around again. I got to have some kind of wall of protection. But when I see you consistently, we say consistency is our greatest weapon. You go in any community where our people live and you hear Brotherhood, they're familiar with the work of the Brotherhood. They're familiar with the work of the peacemakers because of the consistency. And we have to become consistently able to dialogue on a human level.
Absolutely. And in a place like Miami, where you have so many different languages, from Spanish, Creole, French, and so many different communities, it really must be a challenge.
It's a serious challenge. It's as serious a challenge as, I'll use this example, since we're in Miami. If you even look at the relationship of Cubans to Cubans who have different perspectives of their homeland, but all who still have family tied in their homeland, I've seen the politics play a higher role even than in healthcare or education or family relations.
For sure. It's all in the messaging and what strikes the chord inside.
Yeah.
It's really amazing when it comes to that.
So what better place to build a salad bowl?
Right. And in the salad bowl, consider this: race as we know it in this country is not the same experience outside of this country.
That's another thing that's so valuable. And I say this to children all the time as I'm teaching and training, and I'll say to anybody that travel is the greatest learning tool that a human being could have. If all you know is where you lived and where you were born, then that's exactly where you're going to die, mentally as well too. And so as you travel, you get to experience different things.
Such a great point.
Some extreme, some similar, some very, very different, some harsh and cruel, some inviting and loving. But without travel, we don't get that experience. And it's the same thing about traveling within each other's culture. And I have to blame the American educational system for that. The American educational system has a perfect opportunity, if it wanted to become that fulcrum where cultural exchange and learning takes place. You got everything you need, all the ingredients are there, but no, America still chooses to use a Eurocentric framework for everything that it teaches. I was recently doing some work with some doctors in the medical field, to make sure that people in the community are properly informed about COVID-19, pending vaccinations and so forth. And an epidemiologist who happens to work with a group in Boston University that's dealing with racial equity, she says what was so puzzling to her is that the conversation in the medical field is always about what can we do and let's win their trust, versus changing the policies and the practices that have broken it in the first place.
Yeah, that's interesting. That's really, like right now we're dealing with COVID-19.
Right.
And how would you go about that? Like, how do you even start with that?
Well, again, a beautiful thing took place for me. And I received an assignment on July 4th. And the assignment that I received was to start gathering medical professionals and scientists to begin to look into things, not just what we were getting from the news source. And out of that, a beautiful coalition has been built. Anybody who's on Facebook, if you go to 7th Region Coalition, articles, interviews,
7th Region?
7th, right, the number 7, TH, 7th Region Coalition. I think it's balancing out a lot of the misinformation. And so we're also in the process right now of hopefully getting some medical students and some social work students to be able to go door to door in the community. I'll be honest with you. People in most communities, they treating COVID like I treated Zika.
Right.
That's my confession. I treated Zika like it was nothing.
Right.
You could Zika what? Yeah, right. It's really gonna, yeah, really. But that's how I see masses and masses of people treating COVID. And it's a very dangerous thing. And so outreach, one of our affiliates, Neighbors and Neighbors Association, actually has a COVID-19 outreach team that does work out in the community, of course, with the food drives and making sure people have what they need. Our Peacemakers organization, we've been on the ground since April, whether it's food, whether it's diapers, whether it's conflict resolution, domestic violence is gone, all kinds of things, but we're literally in the community doing this work nonstop, and the pandemic definitely has increased it.
And what do you think is the policy that most damaged that trust with the Black community?
Abuse. If you're talking about healthcare, first of all, oh yeah, there's an awesome read by I believe her name is Martha Washington. It's called Medical Apartheid. And she historically chronicles the intentional and purposeful abuses nonstop up until this day. Most people, if they're getting up to date, they hear about the Tuskegee experiment that went on for over 40 years.
Right.
But that's just one avenue of many medical abuses and medical abuses and medical abuses. And the other thing that's key is that our medical industry here is bent on not prevention.
Right.
98% of funds are about after you get sick. And a lot of the research that I've received from scientists and doctors and building these coalitions, the most important thing right now is to build the immune system. And we don't hear that being talked about as much as the Band-Aids that are making people billions of dollars. We're in a very, very critical situation right now.
And is that why you see the incidence of diabetes and many other diseases more prevalent in the Black community?
One of those reasons why, if you think about it for this reason, I use my own personal self as an example. I come from a lineage of a family where only one or two at the most on both sides of my family have lived into their 70s, as far back as our living members can remember. That means the men, particularly in my family, they were dying young. I'm 54 now. Had I not had a healthy change in lifestyle and how to eat to live, I might be in that same situation. But people forget that we were raised on a slave diet. We were raised on the worst foods. We were put under the worst circumstances. And if you even look at the communities that we live in, when you put toxic pollution along with cultural pollution with bad food, we're going to lead the world in comorbidities. We're going to lead the world in comorbidities. And so that's a very serious thing that still hasn't been corrected to this day, but you want to be trusted.
Yeah, I definitely.
Yeah. And there's another point I think is key too. Western medicine in general is very limited when you look at it from a holistic standpoint of practices from around the world. And I think most of us who come from backgrounds and ethnicities, that there were Aboriginal people, there are a lot of different holistic practices that we've had, all the way from how we birth our children to how we eat. And a lot of these practices, they're not accepted. So it's broadening because you have some individuals, that are on both sides that are kind of, again, just like we're talking about, bringing things together. But don't ask people for trust and you're not willing to do the healing and the repair work on the front end.
And I think that goes all the way around. No, I mean, same thing with issues involving criminal justice.
Wow. I remember recently when the ACLU here locally, maybe about 2 or 3 years ago, released a racial disparity study on the criminal justice system. And what made me cry about it is not that it was factual and true, but all those numbers and statistics, they got names next to them. Those are people's families that are being affected by this, and there's no greater example of genocide. There's no greater example of oppression than you look at what has taken place in our criminal justice system, coming from the 70s, the mid 70s, up until now, where we have manufactured an industry of prison and prisoners.
And what do you see happening there? Like what kind of changes can you give us some hope on that we're maybe starting to address?
I think what makes our work so important is that we work with the human being. If the system is going to be what it is, fine. Some people, you want to continue to help change the system, you continue to do that. But think about a drug addict. You can change the system all you want, but if you don't change the urge in that drug addict, you're going to find his drugs. But if you help to transform the mind and the life of that individual who has learned to cope with their trauma and their pain and their healing now, you can put them in a room full of drugs and they won't want anything. So human transformation is the key. Even the work that we do in the inner cities. You wonder why people act like animals? Because you fed them like animals. You taught them like animals. You treat them like animals. They living like animals. Yeah. So we act like animals. But once you humanize, you see the best in all of creation. So we got a lot of work to do to focus on human transformation. I'll give you another example. Even in crime prevention, we had an opportunity as an organization back in 2018 to present our community wellness program between both mayors and individual commissioners from both the city and the county. While one aspect of that community wellness plan is in act right now, we're still searching for funding to put together a 3-gram for community wellness, but you got a $750 million police budget. So the point being is that we need adequate resources. And of course, we've been busy as heaven since these last major incidents have taken place, because it has sparked interest in people wanting to know.
And how do you think, I feel like, but I feel like it's so little, just in resources and in everything else died.
Yeah.
How do we work on that?
Got it. I'll point people to one is a Japanese tree where you plant a seed and for years, it looks like you have done nothing. But once it sprouts, it grows so fast and it grows so big. You have to understand, some of us are just seed planters, but we have to take care of that seed. Taking place these last few months that could have never taken place in the framework of another time period. Queen Mother Moore. For those who don't know, Queen Mother Moore, she works side by, and at this time she was in her late 90s. And I came over to Queen Mother Moore and I got on my knee and I said, "Dear Queen Mother, if you could tell a young brother advice, what would you tell him?" She kind of, I guess, like looked up to kind of see if I was serious or not. And she said, "I would tell him 2 things." Saying here, she said, "When I joined the NAACP at the age of 17, I am 75 years. That story has given me the patience to endure and to even share how to build that patience in others. If you're true about a movement of justice, a movement of freedom, a movement of equality."
I love that. That's the word, patience. How to have such little bit of it to understand the value of it in this kind of work?
you know, masterfully do something with a basketball that other human beings can't. There are master builders that can build the greatest of buildings never thought of before. They're also master art to be the best. We always have to first remember in giving people this who and what they are. That happens. I'll give you a perfect example. This was in Washington, D.C. many years ago. They put me inside of a high school called Woodson. It's going all kinds of crazy. Say, just go in there and whatever students you can get in there to teach the life skills, whatever do, you know. And so they had no roster for me. They had no list for me. They had no nothing. And they couldn't tell the students to come to the class. So my door's open. And so this first group of young sisters, they walk into the class. So I guess some other young sisters, all of them who identified as lesbian. And I'll never forget, we never even touched until the very last week of class at the end of the school year. We were patient enough. And that's where it starts. When we started the Circle of Brotherhood, we made one promise to us: first be brothers. It's not what we put down on first be brothers. You have to build a brother. Iron sharpens iron, steel. Meaning that takes place. There's reading, there's growth, there's development, there's mentoring, there's refinement, there's correction, there's guidance. All of those things are in the Circle of Brotherhood. There's programs, there's projects, there's position. All of that, and all of it must be developed. You know, but the human being can't be left behind. And our training classes, you know, COVID has kind of put a dent in that, but we would average 40 to 50 men a week coming to a training class.
40 to 50.
40 to 50. That average 40 to 50 a week. We do an annual cruise that we've been blessed to do, but it's much more than a cruise. It's really a retreat for the organization and a training for the organization. And the first time, I think 17 went, and the second time it was like 47. Then it was like 88, you know, and I think it got up to like 99. And so who knows? But my point being is we have to create training experiences. Think about it like this, Damian. All of us have had a science class, an English class, a geography class or something. Have we had a class in what does it mean to be who I am? I haven't had that class. Not even biologically, I haven't had that class.
Right.
You know, those classes don't exist, but those conversations and teachings and learnings and practices are needed. So we have to create them. The beautiful work that we do with our young men is just so powerful because they finally, in a safe space, can not be judged, but be guided and corrected. And then that gives us the permission or ability to chastise where it needs to be done. But it's all about proper relationship building.
And how have you seen that transformation since you started this work in those neighborhoods?
Wow. You know, the neighborhoods that we are able to remain in, the culture has changed. And people, they know where to bring their children.
What do you mean by that you're able to remain in?
That's a great point, because we're not able to. Again, one of the biggest things is they want us to volunteer our way out of this. I give a perfect example. We were working in one of the most so-called notoriously violent communities in all of Miami. And we had a sustained program going on there for about 2 or 3 years. Then the funding ran out. Shortly after the funding ran out, there was a shooting in Liberty Square, and 4 young men were shot. And one of those very young men who we worked with was one of those victims. My better example is this. I remember.
Where was that funding coming from?
Well, it depends. Sometimes it could be a small grant here.
Yeah.
You know, one of the things that organizations like ours who do this critical life-saving work need is people to understand how to comprehensively fund and support our work. We're so used to puzzle piecing it. Even the program we're doing right now, as awesome as it is with our Peacemakers program, that's just a piece of our program. And we're kind of confined to do it a certain way. It's almost like a magician, but you got to use somebody else's magic box.
Right.
But I'll never forget this young man. We used to run a rites of passage program at an elementary school in Baltimore in the 80s. And you know, it was a volunteer rites of passage program, so we could only keep it up for 2 years. And I remember seeing one of the young men on the bus one day. He was about 15. Hey, how you doing, man? Oh, man, good to see you. He said, Coach Lyle, you all left us when we needed you the most. And we see a history in our communities of Band-Aid approaches because nobody fully funds and supports something that can clean it up and keep it clean. Just clean up, make it look clean. And then I did my job. And then it becomes a revolving door of human destruction instead of human evolution.
And how do we stop that now? Like, since there's some momentum now, and you know, how do we not let that keep happening?
You know, I have to give credit to, for example, I use the Miami Foundation as an example. You know, the Miami Foundation felt challenged during the season of COVID, in the season of the George Floyd murder, to do some things differently. And they looked at organizations, ours being one of them, you know, that are really doing this work on the ground, you know, and begin to not just give some seed money, but to develop some dialogue and a framework around how can we better support these organizations so that they can do this work that needs to be done. And out of that, you know, a social justice table was formed. And now we're getting the ear and being able to talk to some people in philanthropy who can now have a different mindset. Everybody's got to learn and grow. You know, people who are touched through humanitarian. One of our great friends who we met during the Hunger 9, where 9 of our individuals went on a hunger strike, protesting gun violence for 21 and a half days with just water. One of our great friends from Parkland.
When was this?
This was about a year ago in March. A year ago in March. The Hunger 9.
21 days.
21 and a half days with just water. Tremendous experience. But it brought one of our friends, Shelly Tegelski, who we met during that time frame, who started a pandemic of love right up the road in Parkland. It's about coming together. Parkland students came down to the hunger strike, and now you got children in the hood working with children from Parkland against gun violence. Imagine that.
Yeah, that's exactly what we're talking about.
Right.
That's exactly what we're talking about. And you think that those kind of roundtables and those kind of funding opportunities will help keep this and build this over time so that we don't keep slipping back?
There's no question about it. There's no question about it. We made a promise. We will never, ever, when we know the solution, we will never pretend like we don't know. We know how to stop crime and violence in our community. And we're not going to bat an eye and say that, you know, fund our program.
Yeah.
Fully funded, and then see what happens. Then tell us, you know, look at the results that we're getting right now, hopping on one foot.
Sure. And what about government? What can government do?
Well,
city government, county government, elected leaders who, you know, like
again,
you say, might want to be on for one little term and then jump off.
Right.
How do you provide that consistency with that kind of leadership?
Well, with 2 things. Number one, we wouldn't be where we are without the support of many people in government. And so if you're new in government, I would tell you to find your way, but don't lose your morality. Listen to the people and understand that you are obligated to support them. You know, our work, again, is about building relationships. And as I look at the political landscape in terms of building relationships, I'll start with the police department. There are people in positions right now who are chiefs, majors, and captains and directors who I remember when they first came on the force. But what do? We built a proper relationship. So now you got a whole different mindset there. You know, I'll give you an example. Commissioner Audrey Edmondson. She's meant the world to the circle of Brotherhood. I should say Commissioner Emeritus now, you know, and her work in leading actually the anti-violence initiative, it was her spearhead that got it funded, and that allowed us to put together a staff. You know, and so people have to critically look now and see, and those of us who do this work, we cannot be afraid to be scrutinized. You know, examine
open
us.
books.
That's right. How are we doing? How do we look? What are our results? Now, if our results show you the progress and the excellence, give us our free. That means give us the resources we need that we don't have to penny pinch at building our communities. And then people in private philanthropy, they got to get out of the trick bag. And what I mean by the trick bag, if you historically look at philanthropy on every level, it's generally the same organizations, the same pockets and types of things that create funding for the same organizations, and the rich get richer and the poor stay poor.
You're 100% right. I think a lot of times the money and resources that are available, particularly through philanthropy, they're not doing the work to figure out where that money needs to go because they're not in those communities.
Right.
They're just not there.
Wow, you reminded me of something so powerful. I won't mention the foundation out of respect, but a major foundation reached out for us rather recently. And I'll never forget the question being asked, what do we need to do differently? And it was one of those very things that we mentioned, Damian, that allow the individuals who are doing the work. Don't give us a proposal and have us shape what we do to make sure it fits your proposal so we can get the money. Let us develop what we know that works. And with integrity. We're not just talking about just throw your money away.
Right.
But let the people who do the work, who know what it needs to be done, be done. I tell you, it's amazing when you look at, I see members of the Circle of Brotherhood, the only degree they might have is deodorant, but they can walk in and command a classroom.
Absolutely.
They can get those students to read and to learn and to grow and develop. So we got a lot of work to do.
That's so important. I mean, I'm on that side of looking for resources too, a lot of times. And it strikes me that people are, willing to write a $10,000 check for a gala, or, or they're willing to, or foundations are willing to have you submit report after report after report. I mean, it gets to a point that you feel like you're begging for money that is of tremendous value.
Right.
Because, when you look at your organization, the way it's run, and on the what you do with the resources you get, I bet you're not going to find many organizations.
It's more than a miracle. You reminded me as well, maybe 2 years ago, there's a national organization that deals with Black male achievement, and they build promise communities across the country. They've been in existence for 10 years, and they actually have a spectrum, if you will, where they can measure the activity of Black male involvement. And so they have an annual event, but they noticed that there was a jump in this activity in Miami. And they were trying, what's causing this jump? So they did their investigation, and they ended up inviting us to one of their national conferences just to share some of the things that we're doing and work. But we're definitely making a movement on a Richter scale, but just the love of the members, Damian, who really want to see our community in a better light and our children in a better light. And we have the ability to build it.
And with women, how does it work with the women, since it's mainly a male organization? How do you interact in community and build?
One of the biggest misnomers is that because we're the Circle of Brotherhood, that we're only about working with men. We work with young girls. Yeah, they're young girls that have hurting and healing needs to take place from missing with their fathers. We work with mothers of children who are raising single sons. I'll give you one more example in terms of that whole thing. We have an annual event that honors women. Every January, we honor 10 women who are doing outstanding work in our community. And we even have received an award before. One of our awards, I'll tell you this, I think it's called, it's the organization that gives it, I'll never forget it, Urgent Inc. It's a bra award. The Circle of Brotherhood has a bra award.
That's great.
For our work in the community and the work that we do with our women and our children.
So really, it's a family approach. I mean, you're focusing through the men as the head of households, or the men as maybe the biggest problem, right? At some point, it was the absence of men, or the fact that most of them were jailed, or they were subject to a justice system that was not anything but just, and all the endemic issues we've talked about with systemic racism that helped in some ways destroy the Black family.
No question about it. And if that was a test and it was A, B, C, D, and E was all of the above, I'm bubbling E.
So I just wanted to be clear that
Mhm.
women are very important,
Absolutely.
you know, to the group, and they can
Absolutely.
participate.
Oh, as a matter of fact, on that note too, you should probably find it on our website or Instagram. Our brothers recently released a song called "Wonder Why We Call You Queen" in honor to our women. And I tell you, as a matter of fact, Damon, on our last cruise retreat that we had, they performed that, and there was a woman. I think she was from Switzerland. You know, when they performed that song, she started crying and saying that just that experience she had alone had restored her faith. So you have to understand that the images that are put out every day about unproductive people, be they black, white, or indifferent, and then the negative stereotypes and images you keep putting out about black men, you know, it stirs in the minds of people. But because we've been stirring the pot in the community, say it ain't so.
That's so important, though,
Yeah.
because you're absolutely right.
Mhm.
There isn't really any way for people that have been raised with all of this
Mhm.
to kind of to know any different. You know,
It has to be some interference, but it can't be interference as a big I or little U. Let's call it heartference. Let's interfere by way of the heart, you know, so that we can grow together and we can learn together.
how can we do that better in Miami-Dade?
Well, this is the perfect tilling ground for it.
Yeah.
You've already said
I
it.
think so.
You've already
I think
said
we
it,
live
yeah.
in the most diverse, you know, community.
Right.
Miami-Dade County is
Right.
probably we're like a little experiment for the rest of the nation when it comes, I think, to these issues.
You know, matter of fact, we had a press conference a couple of days after George Floyd was killed, but we didn't have the press conference because of George Floyd. There was an incident that took place in Miami-Dade where a Latino woman killed her child and then said that two black men killed the child. And so just a long story short on that, and our director Ramirez, they did a great job investigating rape, but we had this press conference because that does a lot of damage, you know.
Oof.
And but one of the things that we suggested is that there needs to be actual sessions in the community on race relations. You know,
Absolutely,
let's
there
bring these
does.
folk together. They need the same training you saw us doing with the police. Really, all communities need it. But in that kind of training and in that kind of atmosphere, we have to have what are called fierce conversations. Not fierce in terms of angry, but fierce in terms of confronting the uncomfortable things that we don't know, that we want to know, that we don't share, that we need to share. And wait till you see our trainings post-COVID.
Mm.
Because
I can't wait. I'm
we
gonna
had
go back.
You know, we have a lot of different practices and techniques that we use that really, really open people up. It's just setting that right environment.
I'll tell you, it's a real
Mhm.
challenge, because I remember
Yeah.
when I was in that training, and I consider myself one of those people who's very allied,
Mhm.
you know, in many ways. So I'm not the
Right.
average person by any means,
Right.
right? So I'm already a kind of a particular subset,
Mhm.
and there were so many things I wanted to say, and I stopped myself from
Mhm.
saying so many things,
Mhm.
either because I'm like, well, you know, this isn't the place. You know,
Mhm.
that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about tomatoes. You
Right.
know?
Now,
I shouldn't talk about
this, though.
radishes.
See, but that stirred up inside you. See, that training really is a week-long training.
Mm.
If again, it's got to be condensed into a day for whatever reasons, funding or this or what have you. But think about it. It's a week long. So you can go through those stages and guarantee you might not have said it on day one, but by day 3, you wouldn't be able to hold it back.
Yeah.
You know, so it's a building that takes place as well.
Because it's very difficult. I think when you're dealing with feelings of just human nature, like guilt, you know, and by the way, guilt for something you didn't do necessarily, right?
Right.
You know, we struggle in the LGBT space sometimes
Right.
with gay white men
Uh-huh.
who they were not part of the KKK. They were not
Right.
part of this or that. In fact, they were there marching
Right.
for civil rights
Right.
for Black Americans, but yet
You get lumped in there because of what your brother did, right?
Exactly. And that complicates everything, because then you're trying to like have a conversation,
Mhm.
and people are feeling like, well, I feel
Mhm.
guilty, but why? Because I've never done anything. And so I think just getting people to to just talk about even what we're just saying right now. So hard.
Yeah. You know, it gets easier as the spaces are created. And so if you're teachers, if you belong on school boards, after school programs, college professors, use your space to create the dialogue and it will take care of itself. Again, everything starts with the proper building of relationships. And you know where that starts? There are no big I's and no little U's.
Right.
And so once I can accept, you know, and one of our huge problems is we don't have enough people who know how to properly facilitate to create that kind of space.
Mm-hmm.
So another thing we're getting involved in now is how to train the trainer.
Oh, that would be fantastic.
Yeah, because people have to learn. There are ways that you can create the space. You know, I'll give an example. People think you got to be straight up from the hood in order to deal with people from the hood. Trust me, it's an advantage, but it's also an advantage letting somebody know, look, I don't know nothing about the hood, but here's what I do know. So wherever you are, it don't matter.
Yeah.
Be comfortable. But proper relationships have to be built.
Oh, wow. No, absolutely. Listen, we could go on this topic for a very, very, very long time. We'll leave it for another segment, another show.
Would be my honor.
I want to take this time to just thank you for sharing this time with us, for committing to being here, and for really just being able to be who you are, because I will tell you, it's evident that love works through you and that you're fulfilling God's purpose for you in Miami-Dade. We're lucky to have you.
Oh, by his grace, brother.
When I think about people that, I pray, thank God that this person is here. Brother Lyle, you're one of them. So please keep doing the wonderful work you do. If you're out there and you don't know anything about Circle of Brotherhood, we put up some information for you to reach out. If you're not sure, reach out to Forward Miami. We'll put you in touch. We hope you have a wonderful week. We thank you, Brother Lyle, and we look forward to seeing you next week again, Friday at 4 p.m. Thank you. Have a great weekend.
Honor. God bless.